She bathed a millionaire daily in a coma until one morning he woke up and did something that changed her life in the most shocking way. Hi, my beautiful family. It's your Mr. Peter. If you're here, please stay, just for a moment. You didn't land here by accident. This is a space built on heart, and you're part of it now. Whether it's your first time or your 100th, you are loved and you are welcome. Before the story begins, I want to wrap you in a simple prayer. I pray peace finds your tired thoughts and rests gently on your spirit. I pray that love finds its way back to you, not in loud moments, but in quiet, steady ways. May healing touch every part of you that's been hurting in silence. May your strength rise again, and may you always remember, even when the world forgets, you are never unseen, never unloved. Now, my dear family, please, don't leave the story in the middle. Every line was written with you in mind. When you leave too soon, the heart of the story is left unheard. If this story touches you, rate it out of 10, leave a kind word, and tell me your city or country. Let's remind the world that love still lives here. Let's begin. With all my love, always.
Every night at 11 p.m., Tarra Moar whispered, "I love you," to a sleeping millionaire who had been silent for 8 months, never knowing that those 3 words were the golden thread pulling James Hombre back from the edge of death. Sacred Heart Medical Center's private wing hummed with quiet efficiency as Tara stepped off the elevator, her heart already racing with anticipation. Room 314 had become her sanctuary, her purpose, her entire world condensed into sterile walls that somehow held the most beautiful story she'd ever known. James Hombre lay exactly as she'd left him 12 hours ago, perfectly still, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. 8 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days since the car accident that had stolen the city's most brilliant tech mogul from the world. But Tara saw beyond the coma, beyond the monitors, beyond the medical charts that labeled him a hopeless case. She saw the man who was fighting to come home. "Good evening, my sleeping prince," she whispered, her voice carrying warmth that could melt winter. The silly nickname had started as a joke, this mysterious millionaire who lay beautiful and unreachable like something from a fairy tale, but now it felt like truth. Her nightly ritual began with religious devotion. First, the gentle examination, checking vitals, adjusting pillows, ensuring his comfort with touches that lingered longer than medically necessary. His heart rate always steadied when she arrived, as if his body recognized her presence even in unconsciousness. The bath was her favorite part, the reason she'd specifically requested this assignment despite her supervisor's confusion. Most nurses avoided long-term coma patients. Too depressing, they said. Too hopeless. But Tara had felt inexplicably drawn to this man from the moment she'd seen his peaceful face. She warmed the water to perfection, adding lavender oil that she bought with her own money. Research suggested familiar scents could stimulate neural pathways, but for Tara it was simpler. She wanted James to feel cherished. "I brought vanilla body wash tonight," she said, testing the temperature. Something that smells like comfort instead of hospital antiseptic. Her hands began their careful work, washing away the day with infinite tenderness. His hands were beautiful, long fingers that had built an empire, palms that had touched the future through technology. She'd researched James Hombre obsessively, learning about the genius who'd revolutionized social media, who'd donated millions to medical research, who'd lost both parents young, and built his fortune as their legacy. The confession slipped out like a prayer. 3 years ago, her father had died in a similar bed after his heart attack. His final words haunted and healed her. "I heard you, sweetheart." Every word. That moment had shattered and rebuilt her, leading her to specialize in coma care with unshakable faith that love could reach the deepest darkness. "You remind me of him," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Not in looks, but in presence. My dad made everyone feel safe, even when he needed protecting. You have that same energy. She moved to his chest, careful of the scars that told his trauma story. The accident had been brutal. Drunk driver, red light, concrete barrier. 4 minutes clinically dead before paramedics brought him back. But something had been left behind in that space between life and death. I read about your company today, Tarra said, working on his shoulders. How you built it from nothing after your parents died. You were only 22, but you revolutionized how people connect. Maybe that's why you understand connection, even now, even asleep. Fresh pajamas came next, soft cotton in deep blue that brought out the color she imagined his eyes would be. She'd learned his preferences through magazine articles and interviews, jazz music, poetry, vintage books. This was a man who appreciated beauty. I brought your favorite tonight, she said, activating the small speaker she'd placed on his nightstand. Bill Evans' Waltz for Debbie filled the room, soft and haunting. Maybe when you wake up you can play for me. I'd love to hear you make music. But their evening wasn't complete without reading. She'd started with business journals, thinking company news might stimulate his brain. But one night, impulsively, she'd read him a love poem, and his heart rate had increased dramatically. Now poetry was their language. Tonight we're reading Pablo Neruda, she said, pulling her chair close and taking his hand. 20 love poems and a song of despair. I think you have a romantic soul hiding under all that genius. Their fingers intertwined as if they'd done this dance forever. His skin was warm, his hand fitting perfectly in hers. Sometimes, though she'd never told anyone, she swore she felt him squeeze back. I love you without knowing how or when or from where, she read, her voice catching. I love you simply, without problems or pride. The words felt like confession. Somewhere in these endless nights, Tarra had fallen in love with James Hombre. Not the millionaire or CEO, but the soul she felt stirring beneath stillness, the man who existed in the space between heartbeats. I know it's impossible, she whispered, closing the book and leaning closer. I know you probably can't hear me, and even if you could, I'm just your nurse. But James, I need you to know you're not alone. Someone loves you, someone believes in you, someone is waiting for you to come home. The monitors maintained their steady rhythm as Tarra settled in for the long watch. She would stay until dawn, holding his hand and whispering prayers to whatever force might be listening. She had no idea that in the deepest chambers of his sleeping mind, James Hombre was indeed listening, and that her voice had become the silver thread he followed night after night, trying to find his way back to the world, back to life, back to her. Chapter 2. The Sound of Miracles. At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that shattered every medical textbook, James Hombre's first word in 8 months wasn't help or water. It was Tarra, whispered like a prayer finally answered. Dawn painted Sacred Heart Medical Center in rose and gold as Tarra began her morning routine. She had dozed in the chair beside James's bed, her hand still entwined with his, dreams filled with poetry and the rhythm of his breathing. The hospital stirred to life around them. Breakfast carts, day shift arriving, life returning to the corridors. But room 314 existed in its own peaceful bubble where miracles felt both impossible and inevitable. Good morning, my sleeping prince, Tarra whispered, squeezing his hand gently. Did you dream of waking up? She prepared the morning bath with sacred precision. Warm water, lavender oil, the same tender ritual that had become their shared language. Her voice carried a wordless melody her mother used to sing, something ancient that spoke of love and healing. Perfect weather today, she said, testing water temperature. Maybe later I'll ask Jade if we can visit the sunroom. You always seem more peaceful in natural light. She began with his face, touch feather light as she washed away the night. His features were aristocratic, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, dark lashes resting like silk against his cheeks. She had memorized every line, every shadow. "I've been thinking about when you wake up," she continued, cloth moving across his forehead. "Kai says you love to travel. Maybe somewhere peaceful first. A beach where you can feel sun on your face and remember what it means to be alive." The humming returned as she worked, that wordless lullaby flowing from her heart without conscious thought. It spoke of safety and love, and the promise that darkness always gives way to light. Hmm, the melody floated through the room like morning mist. "My grandmother said music was the language of the soul. Maybe yours can hear mine calling." She moved to his shoulders, hands working with practiced ease. But there was nothing routine about the electricity that danced between her fingertips and his skin. Nothing ordinary about the way her heart raced at his touch. "I read something interesting yesterday," she said conversationally. "Coma patients who hear familiar voices show increased brain activity in memory and emotion centers. I like thinking that means you're listening, storing up these conversations for when you're ready to join them." The humming continued, melody weaving through words like golden thread through fabric. It was then, as her hands moved across his chest and her voice carried that ancient tune, that something shifted. His breathing changed, becoming less automatic and more conscious. His eyelids fluttered with sudden purpose. James." Tara's humming stopped abruptly. His face, peaceful but vacant for so long, seemed to be searching. "James, can you hear me?" And then, like sun breaking through storm clouds, it happened. Tarra. Her name whispered so softly it might have been breath itself, but it was clear, real, directed at her with the precision of a heart finding home. The washcloth slipped from trembling fingers, landing with a splash that echoed like thunder in sudden silence. Her eyes, wide with disbelief and dawning joy, searched his face as if seeing it for the first time. "Tarra," he said again, voice stronger now, rough from disuse but unmistakably intentional. His eyelids fluttered once, twice, then opened to reveal eyes the color of deep ocean water, storm gray with flecks of blue that held the wisdom of someone who had traveled to existence's edge and found his way back. "Oh my God," Tarra breathed, hands flying to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. "James, you're awake. You said my name." She reached for the call button with shaking fingers, eyes never leaving his face. He blinked slowly, adjusting to light after long darkness, his gaze moving around the room with confusion before settling on her with laser focus. "Tarra," he repeated, and this time it sounded like recognition, like greeting, like coming home. "I'm here," she whispered, leaning closer so he could see her clearly. "I'm right here, James. You're safe. You're back." James tried to lift his hand toward her face, the simple movement requiring enormous effort. His fingers trembled as they found her cheek, and when they made contact, his eyes filled with wonder. "You're real," he whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "I thought, in the darkness, I wasn't sure if you were real or if I was dreaming you." "I'm real," Tara laughed through her tears, covering his hand with hers. "James, you've been in a coma for 8 months. You were in a car accident, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be more than okay." Dr. Sage Bennett burst through the door, hair disheveled from sleep, eyes bright with professional alertness. Behind her came Aria Frost and another day-shift nurse, their faces reflecting the excitement and disbelief that accompanied medical miracles. "What happened?" Dr. Bennett asked, moving immediately to James's bedside and pulling out her penlight. "The call said he was conscious." "He said my name," Tara said, stepping back to give the doctor room but keeping her hand extended toward James. "3 times. He looked right at me and said my name. And he touched my face. He knew I was real." Dr. Bennett's examination was swift but thorough, checking his pupils' response to light, testing his reflexes, monitoring his heart rate and blood pressure. Every reading was not just normal, but better than normal. "James, can you tell me your name?" Dr. Bennett asked, her professional calm barely concealing her amazement. "James," he replied, then paused, concentrating. "James Hombre." His eyes drifted back to Tarra between each medical test, as if she were his anchor to consciousness. "Do you know where you are?" "Hospital." He struggled to sit up slightly, wincing with the effort. "Sacred Heart Medical Center, room ... He looked around, taking in details. 314. Dr. Bennett's eyebrows shot up. "You remember your room number?" "I remember her voice," James said, eyes finding Tarra again. "Every night she would tell me about room 314, about the flowers on the windowsill and the way the morning light comes through the blinds. She made this place feel like home." Tarra felt her knees go weak. He had been listening. He had heard everything. "Do you remember what happened to you?" Dr. Bennett continued. James was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowing with concentration. "Car accident. I was driving home from the office. Late, around 11 p.m., there was music playing, The Way You Look Tonight by Sinatra. It was raining, and the streets were slick with reflections." His voice grew stronger as the memories returned. "I was thinking about my life, about being alone. Then there was another car. Drunk driver. Red light. The impact ... He paused, touching his chest where the scars from surgery were hidden beneath his hospital gown. "I died," he said quietly, the words falling into the room like stones into still water. "I remember dying. Everything went black, and I was falling into this gray place. But then..." His eyes found Tarra again. "Then I heard her voice calling me back." The room was completely silent except for the steady beeping of monitors. Dr. Bennett stared at James with undisguised amazement. "This is extraordinary," she murmured, making rapid notes on his chart. "After 8 months, coma patients usually need weeks to regain this level of cognitive function. Your memory is not just intact, it's enhanced. You're remembering details that most trauma patients lose forever." "Doctor," Arya Frost whispered from the doorway. The entire 4th floor heard the commotion. Word is spreading through the hospital like wildfire. The nurses who have been caring for him, they're all gathering in the hallway. They want to see the miracle. Through the open door, they could hear the excited voices of hospital staff, the word miracle being whispered over and over again. "How do you feel, James?" Dr. Bennett asked. "Physically, I mean." James considered this, moving his arms experimentally, flexing his fingers. "Weak," he admitted, "like I've been asleep for a very long time, but also alive, more alive than I've felt in years. There's this clarity, like everything that mattered before the accident was just noise, and now I can hear what's really important." He struggled to sit up further, determination overriding physical weakness. "I want to see her properly," he said, eyes never leaving Tara's face. 8 months of listening to her voice, and I want to really see the angel who brought me back." Tarra moved closer, taking his hand in both of hers. In the better light, she could see that his eyes weren't just storm gray. They were alive with intelligence and depth, and something that looked remarkably like love. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice carrying the wonder of someone seeing sunlight after a long winter. "I imagined what you might look like, but the reality is so much better than any dream." The door burst open again as Kai Brennan stumbled in, still in yesterday's clothes, hair wild from sleep and worry. He had been contacted immediately and had broken several traffic laws getting to the hospital. "James?" Kai's voice broke on his best friend's name, 8 months of grief and hope colliding in that single word. "Holy shit, you're really awake. You're really back." "Language, Kai." James smiled weakly. but the expression transformed his entire face, bringing warmth and humor back to features that had been peaceful but empty for so long. "There's a lady present." Kai's laugh was half-sob as he approached the bed, his usually composed businessman demeanor cracking completely. 8 months, man. 8 months I've been talking to your unconscious ass, telling you about board meetings and quarterly reports, and the first thing you do is correct my language. "I heard you," James said simply, reaching out with his free hand to grasp his best friend's arm. "I heard every word. The company updates, the financial reports, your terrible jokes about hospital food. You kept my world alive when I couldn't live in it myself." Kai's eyes filled with tears as he squeezed James's hand. "I never gave up hope, but there were days. God, James, there were days when I thought we'd lost you forever." "But mostly I heard her," James continued, his gaze returning to Tarra like a compass finding north. "Your voice was my anchor, Tarra. In all that gray nothingness, you were my light guiding me home." Jade Ward appeared in the doorway, her professional composure barely containing her excitement. "Mr. Hombre," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "the entire nursing staff is asking permission to see you. Some of these women have been caring for you for months. They need to see that their work, their faith, their prayers, they need to see that it all mattered." James looked around the room at the gathered faces, Dr. Bennett with her scientific amazement, Arya with her tearful joy, Kai with his overwhelming relief, and Tarra with her luminous love. "Let them come," he said softly. "Let them see that miracles are real." Over the next hour, a steady stream of hospital staff filed through room 314, nurses who had turned him every 2 hours to prevent bed sores, respiratory therapists who had kept his lungs clear, physical therapists who had moved his limbs to prevent atrophy. Each one touched his hand, whispered a welcome back, and left with tears in their eyes. But through it all, James's attention remained focused on Tarra. As the excitement died down and the medical team busied themselves with updated charts and procedures, he caught her hand and pulled her closer. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice meant for her alone, "for believing I would come back, for never giving up on me, for loving me when I couldn't love you back." "I couldn't give up," she whispered in return, her heart soaring as his thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "Something told me you were just lost, not gone. I'm so glad I was right." "There's something else," James said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "In the coma, I could feel your love. Not just hear your voice, but feel the emotion behind it. Every time you held my hand or touched my face or just sat beside me, I felt this warmth spreading through the darkness. Your love was literally keeping me alive." Dr. Bennett, overhearing this, paused in her note-taking. "From a medical standpoint, that's not impossible," she said quietly. "Touch therapy, emotional connection, the power of human bond. We're discovering that these things have measurable effects on recovery. But what you're describing, it's the most powerful example I've ever witnessed." "What happens now?" Tarra asked, suddenly aware that this perfect moment would have to give way to medical reality. "Now we run every test in the book," Dr. Bennett said with a smile. "But James, I want you to know, in 30 years of practicing medicine, I've never seen anything like this. You're not just recovered, you're enhanced. Your cognitive function is testing above normal ranges. It's as if the coma didn't just heal your body, it clarified your mind." "Love does that," James said simply, his eyes never leaving Tara's face. "It strips away everything that doesn't matter and shows you what's truly important." As the medical team prepared for the battery of tests that would follow, as Kai made phone calls to share the miraculous news, as word spread through the hospital and beyond that the impossible had happened, James and Tarra remained connected by their intertwined hands and the unbreakable bond that had formed in the darkness. The miracle of his awakening would be discussed in medical journals and case studies for years to come. But in that moment, all that mattered was the connection between a woman who had loved a sleeping stranger back to life and the man who had followed her voice home from the land of the lost. "I love you," James whispered, the words falling between them like a benediction. "I know it's too soon to say that, and I know the situation is complicated, but Tarra, I love you. I loved your voice before I could see your face, and now that I can see you, now that I can touch you, now that I can tell you, I love you with everything I am." Tarra felt her world realign around those words, felt every hope and dream she had whispered in the darkness suddenly become real. "I love you too," she whispered back. "I've loved you since that first night when you were just a sleeping stranger who somehow felt like coming home." And in room 314 of Sacred Heart Medical Center, as morning sunlight streamed through windows and painted everything in gold, two hearts that had found each other across the space between life and death, began the greatest love story the world had ever known. Chapter 3. Learning to Live Again. James Hombre had conquered Silicon Valley and built an empire worth billions, but the most challenging project of his life turned out to be walking 10 steps to the woman who had become his entire world. 3 days after his awakening, James sat in Sacred Heart's rehabilitation wing, watching Tarra organize equipment with the precision of a general preparing for battle. The private room offered floor-to-ceiling windows and a city skyline he had helped build, but his eyes never left her face. "Ready for another adventure?" Tarra asked, wheeling over an exercise bike. Her smile could power the entire hospital. "Today we see if your legs remember how to pedal." James felt his heart rate spike, not from anxiety about the exercise, but from the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about his progress. Every day brought new discoveries about his angel, and each revelation made him fall deeper. "Before the accident, I ran 5 miles every morning," he said, voice still carrying traces of roughness. "Now I get winded sitting up." "Muscles have memory," Tarra replied, adjusting resistance to its lowest setting. "Your body remembers being strong. We just have to remind it how." She moved around him with practiced efficiency, but James had learned to read the subtle signs that betrayed her professional composure. The way her touch lingered when checking his pulse, the soft intake of breath when their eyes met, the gentle tremor in her hands when she helped him move. "Tell me something about yourself," James said as she guided his feet to the pedals. "Something that has nothing to do with nursing or taking care of broken millionaires." "Broken?" Tarra laughed, the sound like wind chimes. "You're not broken, James Hombre. You're healing. Stop deflecting and answer the question." She positioned herself beside the bike, ready to steady him. "I wanted to be a dancer when I was little. Ballet. I spent weekends at Miss Catherine's School of Dance, dreaming of Lincoln Center." "What happened?" James asked, beginning to pedal slowly. "Life," Tarra said simply. "My dad got sick when I was 16. Hospitals became my second home, and I fell in love with the nurses who cared for him. They brought light into dark places. I decided I wanted to be that light for others." James stopped pedaling, studying her face with new understanding. "That's why you're so good at this. It's not just a job." "Nothing about what I feel for you is just a job," she said quietly, then blushed furiously. "I mean, I know what you mean," James said softly, reaching for her hand. "And I feel it too." The moment stretched between them, electric and fragile, until Dr. Sage Bennett knocked and entered. "How's our miracle patient?" she asked, reviewing James's chart. "Yesterday's brain scans are remarkable. No cognitive impairment, and motor functions recovering faster than we dared hope." "I have excellent motivation," James said, eyes never leaving Tara's face. After the doctor left, Tarra helped James transition to parallel bars for walking practice. This was the moment he both anticipated and dreaded, when his weakness would be most apparent, when the distance between who he had been and who he was now would be impossible to ignore. "Take your time," Tarra said, positioning herself at the end like a lighthouse guiding him home. "Focus on me." James gripped the bars, knuckles white with effort and determination. The first step was agony, legs shaking, muscles screaming after months of disuse. But Tara's face, radiant with encouragement and something deeper, kept him moving forward. "That's it," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "One step at a time. You're doing beautifully." By the fourth step, James was breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead. By the seventh, his vision blurred with exhaustion. But on the eighth step, something magical happened. His body remembered strength, remembered balance, remembered the joy of movement. "Tarra," he said, voice breaking with wonder, "I'm actually walking." "You're walking to me," she confirmed, tears streaming down her cheeks. The final two steps felt like flying. When he reached the end, Tarra was there to catch him, her arms wrapping around him as he swayed with exhaustion and triumph. For a moment that lasted forever, they held each other, his face buried in her hair, her heart beating against his chest. "I've got you," she whispered into his shoulder. "I've always got you." James pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, hands framing her face with trembling fingers. "How did I get so lucky? How did I end up with an angel for a nurse?" "Maybe we were meant to find each other this way," Tarra said softly. "Maybe everything, good and terrible, led us to this moment." The afternoon brought more exercises, more small victories, more moments when their professional relationship blurred into something deeper. James learned that Tarra had a sister named Ember studying art therapy, that she made terrible coffee but amazing cookies, that she sang in her car and cried during sad movies. "What about you?" Tarra asked as she helped him through arm exercises. "Tell me something not in the business magazines." James considered this, arms working against resistance bands. "I play piano. Jazz, mostly. My mother taught me before she died." "I knew it," Tarra exclaimed. "I could tell by your hands. They're musicians' hands. I used to compose when I was stressed, my way of processing emotions I couldn't express." "What was the last song you composed?" The question hit unexpectedly, bringing vivid memory. "The night before the accident," he said quietly. "I'd had a terrible fight with someone I thought I loved. I spent hours at the piano trying to make sense of it all." Tarra waited patiently. "Her name was Sue," James continued, voice strengthening. "We were married, but it was toxic. She wanted my money, my status, not me. The night of the accident, she told me she'd been having an affair, that she was leaving and taking half of everything." "I'm sorry," Tarra said simply, hand finding his. "It was devastating then," James admitted. "But lying here these past months, listening to your voice, feeling your care, I realized what I had with Sue wasn't love. It was just two people using each other." "What makes you say that?" James turned to face her fully, eyes serious and intent. "Because now I know what love feels like. Love doesn't take, Tarra. Love gives. Love heals. Love brings you back from the dead." The confession hung in the air between them, precious and terrifying. Tarra felt her heart stop and restart, felt the world tilt as everything she had hoped but never dared believe suddenly became real. "James," she whispered. "I know it's crazy," he said quickly. "I know I'm your patient. This is complicated, and I'm still married to someone who doesn't deserve the title. But Tarra, what I feel for you is exactly what I feel for you," she finished, smile breaking through like sunrise. "I love you too, James. I've loved you since that first night when you were just a sleeping stranger who somehow felt like coming home." When their lips met, it was soft and tentative at first, a question asked and answered in the space of a heartbeat. But then James's hand tangled in her hair, and Tara's arms wrapped around his neck, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of promises and futures and love that could conquer even death. They broke apart, breathless, foreheads touching, both amazed by the magnitude of what they had just acknowledged. "What happens now?" Tara asked, voice shaky with emotion and possibility. "Now," James said, thumb tracing her cheek, "we figure out how to build a life together, one step at a time." Outside the window, the city sparkled in afternoon sun, a world full of possibility waiting for two hearts brave enough to claim their miracle. Chapter 4. Colors of the Heart. The moment James Hombre saw his first sunset in 8 months, he realized he had been living in black and white his entire life, until Tarra Moar painted his world in colors that didn't exist before love. "I need to get out of this room," James announced Friday evening, restless energy radiating from every muscle. His recovery was miraculous, each day bringing increased mobility and growing frustration with medical confinement. Tara looked up from her charts, studying the determination in his eyes. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "There's a garden here. Actual grass, actual sky, actual fresh air that doesn't smell like antiseptic." His grin was becoming dangerously irresistible. "And technically, you're my primary nurse. Doesn't that give you discretionary power? Are you trying to manipulate me, Mr. Hombre?" "Absolutely," he replied without hesitation. "Is it working?" James looked better than he had since awakening. Color in his cheeks, eyes bright and alert, muscle tone improving daily. More importantly, confinement was affecting his mental state, and Tara knew emotional healing was crucial. "Fine," she said, throwing up her hands. "But we're taking a wheelchair, and at the first sign of fatigue, we're coming back." "Deal," James agreed immediately, smile brilliant enough to power the hospital. 20 minutes later, Tara pushed James through corridors toward the healing garden, their path lit by golden afternoon sun. James clutched a mysterious bag from the hospital gift shop, refusing to explain despite Tara's curiosity. "Close your eyes," he said as they approached the garden entrance. "James, I'm pushing the wheelchair. Trust me," he said, voice soft with anticipation. "Please." Something in his tone made her comply, slowing considerably as they passed through automatic doors. Evening air hit them like a gentle caress, carrying jasmine and freshly cut grass. "Okay," James said, voice thick with emotion. "Open them." Tara opened her eyes to find James staring at the garden with absolute wonder. His hands gripped the armrests, entire body leaning forward as if he could drink in the sight. "James," she asked softly, "are you all right?" "The colors," he whispered, voice breaking. "Oh God, Tara, look at the colors." She followed his gaze, the healing garden in evening glory, rose bushes heavy with coral, crimson and blush blooms, lavender swaying gently, purple spikes catching light like amethyst, golden marigolds and white jasmine, creating a tapestry that glowed in setting sun. "It's beautiful," she agreed, watching his face more than the garden. "No, you don't understand," James said, turning to her with tears in his eyes. "In the coma, everything was gray, shadows and mist and endless twilight. Even after I woke, it was like someone had turned down saturation on the world. But this," he gestured helplessly, "it's like seeing for the first time." Tara felt her heart constrict. She moved around to face him, kneeling beside his wheelchair. "Maybe," she said softly, "you needed to come back to life completely before you could really see again." James reached out to touch her face, thumb tracing her cheek with infinite tenderness. "Maybe I needed you to show me what life could look like." They stayed like that while the garden bloomed around them in spectacular silence. Finally, James cleared his throat and reached for his mysterious bag. I have something for you, he said, suddenly nervous. The gift shop selection is limited, but I wanted to give you something beautiful. From the bag, he pulled a small potted orchid, delicate white petals with deep purple centers that seemed to glow in evening light. Elegant and exotic, completely different from practical gifts most people might choose. James, Tarra breathed, accepting the plant reverently. It's gorgeous. But you didn't need to. Yes, I did, he interrupted gently. Tarra, you've given me everything. My life, my sanity, my heart. The least I can do is give you flowers. She cradled the orchid against her chest. I love it. But more than that, I love that you thought of me. I think of you constantly, James admitted, voice rough with honesty. Every breath, every heartbeat, every conscious moment. You're there. Tarra set the orchid on a nearby bench and returned to his side. Tell me what you're thinking about when you think of me. James was quiet, organizing thoughts too big for words. I think about how you hum without realizing it, how your hands are magic. They ease pain and bring comfort and make me feel safe in a way I've never experienced. How you see people, really see them, not their bank accounts or reputations. What else? Tarra asked, voice barely above a whisper. I think about traveling with you, James continued, eyes growing distant with possibility. Showing you places I've been but never experienced because I was always working. I want to take you to lavender fields in Provence, where purple is so intense it looks like spilled paint. I want to watch sunrise over Angkor Wat and see if it's more beautiful than how you look when you sleep in that chair. Tarra felt tears gathering. I've never been anywhere. The farthest I've traveled is 2 states over for a nursing conference. Then we'll paint the world together, James said simply. Real paintings, not just words. We'll go everywhere and make memories that will last lifetimes. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in rose gold and deep orange that reflected in James's eyes like fire. Other visitors moved through the garden, but Tarra and James existed in their own private universe. Can I tell you something? James asked as stars began to appear. Anything. During the coma, I had dreams, not usual dreams. These were different, more real. He paused, searching for words. I was in this gray place, like being underwater but able to breathe. Everything was muffled and distant except one thing. What was that? Your voice, he said, eyes finding hers in twilight. It was like a golden thread running through darkness. Every night I would follow that thread, trying to find my way back to consciousness, back to you. You were my lighthouse, Tarra. You guided me home. The confession hung between them, precious and fragile in evening air. Tarra felt her heart swell with emotion so intense it was almost painful. James, she whispered, leaning closer. I know this is crazy, he said quickly. I know we barely know each other conventionally, and the situation is complicated, but… Tarra silenced him by placing her finger gently against his lips. It's not crazy. It's the most sane thing I've ever heard. She leaned closer, drawn by magnetic pull that had existed between them since that first morning. James's hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer until their breath mingled. Tarra, there you are. They sprang apart as Arya Frost appeared around a corner, face bright with excitement. She stopped short when she saw their positions, eyebrows climbing. Oh, Arya said, knowing smile spreading. Am I interrupting something? No, Tarra said quickly, cheeks burning. We were just enjoying the garden. Uh-huh, Arya replied, clearly not buying it. Well, enjoy away. Jade Ward is looking for you about next week's scheduling. As Arya disappeared, Tarra and James sat in charged silence, the moment broken but electricity stronger than ever. We should probably head back, Tarra said reluctantly. Probably, James agreed, though neither moved. Thank you, Tara said, gesturing to the orchid and the magical evening, for reminding me there's beauty in the world. Thank you, James replied, for showing me what love looks like. As they made their way back, both knew something fundamental had shifted. The garden had been more than escape. It had been a promise of the life they could build together, painted in colors that only existed when two hearts found their perfect match. Chapter 5. The night. Everything changed. When the lights went out at Sacred Heart Medical Center at 11:47 p.m., Tarra Moar had no idea that dancing shadows and candlelight would become the backdrop for the most passionate night of her life. The power outage struck without warning, plunging Sacred Heart into eerie quiet, broken only by emergency generators humming to life. Tara was finishing evening rounds when lights flickered once, twice, then died, leaving corridors bathed in soft, battery-powered emergency lighting. She hurried toward James's room, heart racing. He'd been having nightmares lately, fragmented accident memories that jolted him awake in cold sweats. The darkness would only make it worse. "James," she called softly, pushing open his door to find the room illuminated only by pale green monitor glow and silver moonlight streaming through windows. "I'm here," came his voice from darkness, tight with tension. "What happened?" "Power outage," Tara explained, feeling her way to the emergency cabinet. "Probably a transformer in the storm. Generators will keep essential systems running, but we'll be in the dark for a while." She found what she needed: battery-powered lanterns and candles for exactly this emergency. As she lit the first candle, warm golden light bloomed, casting dancing shadows and transforming the sterile space into something magical and intimate. "Better?" she asked, setting the candle on his bedside table. "Much," James replied, but she could hear underlying anxiety. Could you stay? I know your shift is over, but—" "Of course," Tara said without hesitation, settling into her familiar chair. "I'm not leaving you alone in the dark." She lit 2 more candles, placing them around the room until the space glowed with soft, flickering light. The effect was breathtaking. Harsh medical equipment faded into shadow, while warm light highlighted James's face like a Renaissance painting. "Tell me about the nightmares," Tara said gently, pulling her chair closer. "Doctor Bennett says they're normal, but that doesn't make them less frightening." James was quiet, hands restless against white sheets. "It's always the same," he said finally. "I'm driving home and The Way You Look Tonight is playing. It was raining, streets slick with neon reflections. I remember thinking how beautiful the city looked." Tara reached out to take his hand, fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become natural as breathing. "Then I see the other car," James continued, voice growing rough. "Time slows down, and I know what's going to happen, but I can't stop it. The impact, the spinning, everything going black. Except in the nightmare, I don't wake up. I'm trapped in darkness forever, and no one comes to find me." "But someone did find you," Tara said softly. "I found you, and I brought you home." James turned to look at her in candlelight, eyes reflecting golden flames like stars. "How did you know? How did you know I was still in there?" Tara felt her heart race as they approached territory they had been circling, the truth about what had driven her to care for him with such devotion. "Because I fell in love with you," she whispered, confession slipping out like a prayer. "Not the millionaire or CEO, but the man who existed in the space between heartbeats. I fell in love with your peaceful face and gentle hands and the way you seemed to be listening even when you couldn't respond." James's breath caught audibly in intimate darkness. "Tara, I used to tell you everything," she continued, voice growing stronger. "About my day, my dreams, places I wanted to travel, and the life I wanted to build. I told you about my father and how losing him taught me that love doesn't end just because someone can't answer back. I told you I believed in miracles and that I was waiting for you to come home to me. I remember, James said, voice thick with emotion. Every word, every story, every moment you spent beside me. Your voice was the only real thing in all that gray nothingness. Candlelight flickered between them, creating an intimate world where only truth could exist. Tarra felt 8 months of suppressed emotion rising like a tide. I used to imagine what it would be like when you woke up, she confessed. I pictured you opening your eyes and seeing me, really seeing me, and knowing somehow that we belonged together. It's exactly what happened, James interrupted, free hand reaching up to cup her face. The moment I opened my eyes and saw you, I knew I was home. Not because of the hospital or medical care, but because you were there. Tarra felt tears gathering as she leaned into his touch. I was so scared that when you recovered, when you remembered your real life, you would forget about the night nurse who talked too much and dreamed too big. Forget you, James's voice was incredulous. Tarra, you are my real life. Everything that came before was just marking time until I found you. The confession hung in the air, precious and fragile in dancing candlelight. James's thumb traced her cheek, wiping away tears she didn't realize had fallen. I need to tell you something else, he said, voice dropping to a whisper. During the coma, I could feel when you touched me. Not physically, but spiritually. Every time you held my hand, or smoothed my hair, or rested your palm against my chest, I felt warmth spreading through the darkness. You were healing me from the inside out. Tara's breath caught. You could feel me. I could feel your love, James corrected softly. It was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Even when I couldn't respond, couldn't move or speak or give you any sign, your love was keeping me alive. The revelation broke something open in Tara's chest, releasing 8 months of fear and hope and desperate love. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you so much it terrifies me. Don't be terrified, James murmured, hand tangling in her hair. Be brave. Be brave enough to let me love you back. When their lips met, it was nothing like their hesitant first kiss. This was fire and starlight and 8 months of longing condensed into a single perfect moment. James kissed her like she was oxygen, and he had been drowning, like she was music, and he had been deaf to beauty his entire life. Tarra melted into him, hands fisting in his pajama shirt, as she poured every unspoken word, every midnight confession, every desperate prayer into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, faces illuminated by candlelight and the glow of something that transcended the physical world. Stay with me tonight, James whispered, forehead still pressed against hers. Not as my nurse, not because it's your job, but because I can't bear another night without you beside me. James, I shouldn't. Please, he interrupted, voice raw with need. We don't have to do anything but talk and hold each other. I just need you close. I need to know this is real. Tarra looked into his eyes, seeing not just desire, but vulnerability and hope and love so pure it took her breath away. Okay, she whispered. Yes. James shifted carefully to one side of the narrow bed, wincing as his healing body protested. Tarra slipped under the covers beside him, her body fitting perfectly against his, as if they had been designed to occupy the same space. For a long moment, they simply held each other in candlelit darkness, marveling at skin against skin, heartbeat against heartbeat, breath mingling between them. They talked through the night as candles burned low, sharing stories and secrets and plans for a future that felt both impossible and inevitable. James told her about the loneliness of being successful but empty. Tarra shared her dreams of making a difference, of using her gift for healing to help people find hope. As dawn approached, painting the room in rose and gold, they both knew something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer patient and caregiver. They were soulmates who had found each other across the space between life and death. "Whatever happens next," James whispered as sunlight began to chase away candlelight, "I want you to know that you saved me. Not just medically, but in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Tarra replied, fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "You showed me what it means to love someone completely." The power came back on with a sudden hum, but neither moved to extinguish the candles. Some kinds of light were too precious to waste, some moments too perfect to end. In room 314, two hearts that had found their perfect match settled into peaceful sleep, surrounded by dying candlelight that had witnessed the birth of forever. Chapter 6. The Ghost Returns. Sue Paduska walked into Sacred Heart Medical Center, wearing designer heels that clicked like gunshots on marble floors, carrying legal documents that could shatter a love story 8 months in the making, and wielding a smile sharp enough to cut through every dream built in darkness. The morning after the most perfect night of Tarra's life began with what should have been routine, helping James with physical therapy while they both tried to hide that their world had shifted on its axis. The candlelight was gone, replaced by harsh fluorescence, but intimacy remained, crackling in every glance and touch. "You're glowing," Arya observed, entering with James's breakfast tray, knowing smiles suggesting she suspected exactly why her best friend looked like she'd swallowed starlight. "Either you've discovered amazing skincare, or something very interesting happened during the power outage." Tarra felt heat rise in her cheeks as she helped James settle against his pillows. "The power came back around 6 a.m., she said, failing at professional detachment. "Uh-huh," Arya replied, setting down the tray with exaggerated care. "I'm sure you spent those 7 hours discussing medical protocols." James caught Tara's hand, fingers intertwining in a gesture becoming natural as a breathing. "Actually," he said, eyes never leaving Tara's face, "we talked about the future." The moment was shattered by commotion in the hallway, raised voices, sharp tap of expensive heels, and Jade Ward's diplomatic but firm tones, managing an increasingly volatile situation. "I don't care what your visiting policies are," a woman's voice cut through morning quiet like a blade. "I am his wife, which gives me legal rights that supersede your hospital bureaucracy." Tarra felt blood drain from her face as the words registered. "Wife." The room tilted sideways as she looked at James, whose expression had gone from contentment to horror. "James?" Tarra whispered, voice barely audible. "What is she talking about?" Before he could answer, the door burst open to reveal a woman from a fashion magazine. Blonde hair in perfect waves, designer suit worth more than Tarra made in 6 months, and eyes like winter ice that swept the room with predatory assessment. "Hello, darling," Sue Paduska said, voice dripping false sweetness as she focused on James. "Miss me?" The silence was deafening. Tarra felt like she was watching from outside her body, unable to process the nightmare destroying everything beautiful about the morning. "Sue," James said, voice flat and cold in a way Tarra had never heard. "What are you doing here?" "Visiting my husband, of course," Sue replied, smile sharpening as she noticed Tara's white face and James's protective grip on her hand. "I heard about your miraculous recovery and simply had to see for myself." "Ex-husband," James corrected firmly. But something flickered in Sue's expression that made Tara's stomach clench. "Actually, darling, that's where things get interesting," Sue said, pulling an expensive leather folder from her handbag. "In all the chaos following your accident, certain legal formalities were overlooked." Jade Ward appeared in the doorway, face flushed with embarrassment and anger. I'm sorry, Mr. Hombre. She insisted she had legal rights. It's fine, Jade, James said quietly, though his jaw was clenched. Let her say whatever she came to say. Sue's smile widened as she pulled out official documents. Our divorce was never finalized, James. The papers were filed, yes, but required both signatures for the final decree. When you had your accident before we could complete the process, legally speaking, we're still married. The words hit Tarra like physical blows. Married. Still married. The man she had fallen in love with, given her heart to completely, belonged to someone else. Someone looking at her now with deliberate cruelty. That's impossible, James said, voice gaining fury. The lawyers said... The lawyers said many things, Sue interrupted smoothly. But I am still, legally and officially, Mrs. James Hombre, which means I have rights regarding your medical care, business decisions, and financial assets. Tarra felt walls closing in. She tried to pull her hand free, but James's grip tightened, eyes never leaving Sue's face. What do you want? James asked, voice dangerous and low. What I've always wanted, darling. My fair share. Sue's mask slipped momentarily, revealing the calculating predator beneath polished exterior. You've had 8 months to think about our marriage, about mistakes we both made. I'm hoping that near-death experience gave you perspective on what's really important. It did, James said, voice growing stronger. It showed me exactly what real love looks like, and it has nothing to do with you. Sue's gaze flicked to Tarra with undisguised contempt. How sweet. The rich patient falls for his devoted nurse. How predictable. She turned back to James, voice hardening. But sentimentality doesn't change the law, James. I have rights, and I intend to exercise them. Tarra finally found her voice. James, is this true? Are you still married to her? The pain in her voice galvanized James into action. He struggled to sit straighter, eyes blazing with fury that transformed his demeanor. Tarra, listen to me. How touching, Sue interrupted with cold laughter. But personal feelings are irrelevant here. James, I've contacted Finn Lawson about our situation. He's reviewing the legal implications as we speak. As if summoned, Finn Lawson appeared in the doorway, usually immaculate appearance disheveled, face grim. He clutched thick legal documents and wore the expression of someone bearing terrible news. James, Finn said, voice heavy with regret, we need to talk. Talk here, James commanded, hand still gripping Tarra's. I want Tarra to hear whatever you have to say. Finn glanced at Sue, who nodded graciously as if granting permission. The divorce decree was never entered into court record, he said quietly. Due to your incapacitation, the process was suspended indefinitely. Legally, your marriage to Sue is still valid. Tarra felt her last hope crumble. She finally succeeded in pulling her hand free, ignoring James's desperate attempt to hold on. I should go, she said, voice hollow. This is a family matter. No, James said fiercely, trying to get out of bed despite his weakness. Tarra, don't you dare leave. This doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't it? Sue asked with mock concern. James, darling, adultery is still a crime in some states. And given your recent medical challenges, questions about your competency could be raised. Questions that might affect your ability to make decisions about your business, your assets, your care. The threat hung like poison. Tarra understood immediately. If James continued their relationship, Sue could use it as evidence he wasn't mentally competent, potentially giving her control over his entire life. You're despicable, James snarled, entire body shaking with rage. You left me. You walked out the night before the accident and said you never wanted to see me again. I was emotional, Sue replied with a shrug, though something flickered in her eyes, perhaps a shadow of genuine regret, before the mask returned. People say things they don't mean when upset. The important thing is I'm here now, ready to honor our vows for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Tara watched with growing horror, finally understanding the full scope of what they faced. This wasn't just about love or money, it was about power, control, and systematic destruction of everything she and James had built. There has to be something we can do, Tara said desperately to Finn. Finn's expression was sympathetic, but grim. A competency hearing could resolve the marriage issue, but it would be lengthy. And if James were declared incompetent, even temporarily, Sue would have legal control over everything, James finished, voice hollow. My company, my assets, my medical decisions. She could have you barred from seeing me. Sue's smile was triumphant. Finally, someone who understands. Now, James, I think it's time we discussed our reconciliation. Perhaps somewhere more private? Get out, James said, voice deadly quiet. Get out of this room, this hospital, and my life. I'm afraid that's not possible, darling, Sue replied smoothly. After all, I am your wife. I have every right to be here. She moved toward the chair where Tara had spent countless nights keeping vigil, the symbolism clear. Sue was claiming territory, marking possession, making it clear she intended to erase every trace of love that had flourished in this space. If you touch that chair, James said, voice cold enough to freeze fire, I will have security escort you out in handcuffs. You could try, Sue said, settling into the chair anyway. But I think you'll find that being legally married gives me certain privileges your little nurse friend doesn't enjoy. The casual cruelty snapped something inside James. Despite his weakness, he managed to swing his legs over the bed, entire body radiating protective fury. Don't you ever, he said, voice shaking with controlled rage, speak about Tara that way again. She is worth 1,000 of you, and if you think for 1 second I'm going to let you destroy what we have. What you have is illegal, Sue interrupted coldly. What you have is fantasy built on medical dependency and misplaced gratitude. What you have is over. Tara felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, which was already broken, but something deeper. Her faith in happy endings, perhaps, or her belief that love could conquer all. I need some air, she said quietly, moving toward the door. I need to think. Tara, please, James called after her, voice breaking on her name. Don't let her win. Don't let her take you away from me. Tara paused in the doorway, looking back at the man who had become her world. He was pale and shaking, trying to stand despite weakness, reaching for her across a distance that suddenly felt infinite. I'm not going anywhere, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. I just need a moment. As she fled down the corridor, Sue's triumphant laughter echoed behind her, the sound like breaking glass in the sanctuary where love had once bloomed. For the first time since James had spoken her name in that miraculous dawn, Tara wondered if some miracles were too good to last, if some love stories were destined to end before they truly began. But even as doubt consumed her, even as fear whispered that Sue might be right, one truth remained. She loved James Hombre with every fiber of her being, and that love, no matter what legal documents said, no matter what battles lay ahead, was real, pure, and worth fighting for. Chapter 7. Fighting for Forever. The courtroom had witnessed 1,000 legal battles, but never had its marble walls heard a nurse testify that love could literally raise the dead, until Tarra Moar took the stand to fight for her soulmate. 3 weeks after Sue's devastating reappearance, the courthouse buzzed with scandalous energy. The case had captured the city's attention: a tech millionaire, a devoted nurse, and a wife returning from the grave to claim her fortune. The gallery packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and hospital staff who had witnessed James's miraculous recovery. Tarra sat behind the defendant's table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She wore her best navy dress, chosen by Ember, and had spent the morning fighting tears as she watched James struggle with weakness that had returned under the stress of legal battle. The fight had taken its toll. His nightmares had returned with vengeance, and physical therapy progress had stalled as anxiety consumed his energy. But despite tremors and shadows under his eyes, James insisted on attending every hearing, every moment of their fight for the future. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Margaret Chen," the bailiff announced. Judge Chen was silver-haired and severe, with eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for cutting through legal nonsense with surgical precision. She had reportedly once told a lying witness that perjury was an insult to her intelligence. "We are here for Paduska versus Hombre," Judge Chen said, voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. Specifically addressing Mrs. Sue Poduska's petition, questioning the mental competency of her husband, James Hombre, and seeking conservatorship over his person and estate. Tara's heart constricted as formal language reduced their love story to legal terminology. Beside James, Finn Lawson looked confident, but tense, usually perfect hair disheveled from morning preparation. Across the aisle, Sue sat beside Victoria Sharp, a shark-like attorney with a reputation for destroying witnesses clinically. Sue had dressed for war in expensive black that managed to look both grieving and predatory. "Ms. Sharp," Judge Chen said, "your opening statement." Victoria Sharp rose with predatory grace, smile cold and calculating. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about protecting a vulnerable man from decisions that could destroy everything he's worked his life to build." Tara bit her lip to keep from crying out as Sharp painted James as a confused invalid manipulated by an opportunistic nurse. According to Sharp's narrative, James's infatuation with Tara was textbook transfer, a psychological phenomenon where patients developed romantic feelings for caregivers due to trauma and dependency. "The evidence will show," Sharp continued, gaining momentum, "that Mr. Hombre's judgment has been severely compromised by brain injury, that he is making decisions based on medical dependency rather than rational thought, that he needs protection from those who would exploit his vulnerable state." When Sharp sat down, Finn Lawson rose to present James's defense. His opening was passionate and eloquent, painting a picture of a man who had found true love through his darkest period, whose recovery had been accelerated by that love, and whose mental faculties were sharper than ever. "You will hear testimony," Finn said, voice ringing with conviction, "proving Mr. Hombre's cognitive function is completely normal, that his relationship with Ms. Moore is based on genuine affection and shared values, not medical dependency, and you will learn that Mrs. Paduska's concern is motivated not by love, but by greed." The first day consisted of medical experts, neurologists, and psychiatrists who testified to James's mental competency. Dr. Sage Bennett provided compelling evidence that James's cognitive function was not only intact, but had improved dramatically since awakening. But real drama began on the second day, when Victoria Sharp called Sue to the stand. Sue played her role to perfection. The concerned wife devastated by her husband's accident, who had spent months hoping for his recovery, now worried about his ability to make sound decisions. She spoke with perfect emotion, voice breaking at precisely the right moments. "He's not the same man I married," Sue said, dabbing her eyes. "The James I knew was focused, driven, practical. This man seems lost in romantic fantasies, making decisions based on emotion rather than logic." "And your opinion of his relationship with Ms. Moore?" Sharp asked. "I think she's a lovely woman who did an admirable job caring for my husband," Sue replied with calculated magnanimity. "But I believe James has confused gratitude with love, dependency with affection. He needs time to heal, to remember who he was, without outside influences clouding his judgment. Finn's cross-examination was brutal, but effective. He methodically dismantled Sue's portrayal of their marriage, revealing fights, separation, and, most damaging, her affair with her personal trainer, ongoing for months before James's accident. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Poduska, that you told your husband the night before his accident that you were leaving him?" Finn asked. "We had an argument," Sue admitted, composure slipping. "Married couples fight. Isn't it true you told him you had been seeing another man?" "I was emotional." "Isn't it true you cleaned out your joint bank account and moved out before his accident?" "I needed space." "And isn't it true you only returned when you learned he had regained consciousness?" "I came back because I love my husband," Sue snapped, mask finally slipping. The courtroom erupted. Judge Chen gavelled for order. Finn had made his point. Sue's concern was financial, not emotional. But the turning point came on the third day when Tarra took the stand. She had barely slept, terrified of saying the wrong thing. But as she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, strange calm descended over her. "State your name for the record," Finn said gently. "Tarra Moar. Your profession." "Registered nurse specializing in neurological care and coma patients." Finn walked her through credentials, experience, and assignment to James's case. But when he reached the heart of her testimony, her relationship with James, Tara's voice grew stronger. "I fell in love with James Hombre long before he woke up," she said, voice carrying clearly through silent courtroom. "I fell in love with his peaceful face, his gentle spirit, and the way he seemed to be fighting to come back to life. I talked to him every night for 8 months, believing that somewhere in that darkness he could hear me. And when he awakened, what was his condition?" "Miraculous," Tarra replied without hesitation. "His cognitive function was perfect. He remembered conversations I'd had with him during his coma, music I'd played, stories I'd told. He woke up knowing my name, knowing who I was, knowing he cared about me." Victoria Sharp's cross-examination was vicious. She attacked Tara's credibility, motivations, and professional ethics. She suggested Tarra had violated patient boundaries, taken advantage of a vulnerable man, that her feelings were based on some misguided savior complex. "Isn't it true, Ms. Moore, that you specifically requested assignment to Mr. Hombre's case?" Sharp asked, voice dripping insinuation. "Yes," Tarra replied honestly. "I felt drawn to help him. Drawn to help a millionaire patient rather than indigent patients in the general ward. Drawn to help a man who seemed to be fighting to live," Tarra corrected firmly. "Income had nothing to do with it. Isn't it true you hope to benefit financially from your relationship?" "No," Tarra said, voice rising with indignation. "I never asked James for anything except the chance to love him." "Love him? Or love his bank account?" "Objection," Finn called, but Tarra was already answering. "I loved him when he couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't give me anything but the privilege of caring for him," she said, tears streaming but voice steady. "I loved him when he was just a man lying in a hospital bed with no guarantee he would ever wake up. I loved him when loving him meant sitting alone night after night, reading to someone who couldn't respond, holding the hand of someone who couldn't hold mine back." The courtroom was completely silent. "I loved James Hombre when he had nothing to offer me but hope," Tarra continued, voice breaking with raw emotion. "And I love him now, not despite his vulnerability, but because of his incredible strength. Because he fought his way back from death's edge, because he chose to live, because he chose me." When Tarra finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even Judge Chen seemed moved, and several jury members were openly crying. But the most powerful moment came when James took the stand. Despite visible weakness, despite tremors and effort, it cost him to walk to the witness box. James's testimony was clear, coherent, and devastating to Sue's case. "I remember the night before my accident," he said, voice growing stronger. "Sue told me she was leaving, that she'd been having an affair, that she never loved me. She said marriage to me was like being in prison with expensive bars." He paused, gathering strength, eyes finding Tarra. "Then I woke up 8 months later to discover what real love looks like. Tarra Moar brought me back to life with her devotion, her faith, and her pure heart. She didn't know I was a millionaire when she fell in love with me. She fell in love with a man who couldn't even speak her name." When Victoria Sharp tried to attack James during cross-examination, suggesting his judgment was impaired by gratitude and trauma, James's response was swift and sure. "Miss Sharp," he said, voice carrying the authority of a man who had built an empire, "I have made billion-dollar decisions under pressure, negotiated international contracts, and managed thousands of employees. My judgment has always been my greatest asset, and that judgment tells me that Tarra Moar is the best thing that has ever happened to me." The coup de grace came when Kai Brennan testified as character witness. He not only testified to James's mental competency, but produced evidence that Sue had been systematically draining their joint accounts before the accident, planning her escape while James lay dying. "She didn't visit him once," Kai said, voice thick with disgust. "Not once in 8 months. I was there, Tarra was there, the entire hospital staff grew to love him, but his own wife never came to see if he was alive or dead." By closing arguments, it was clear which way the wind was blowing. Finn's closing was passionate and personal, focusing on the miraculous love story that had literally brought a man back from death's brink. Sharp's closing was technical and cold, focusing on legal technicalities that seemed petty compared to emotional testimony the court had heard. When Judge Chen retired to consider her decision, Tarra and James sat together in the hallway, holding hands and trying not to hope too much. 3 hours felt like 3 years, but finally the bailiff called them back. "After careful consideration of all evidence," Judge Chen said, voice formal but with a slight smile, "I find that Mr. James Hombre is mentally competent to make his own decisions regarding his person, his assets, and his relationships. Furthermore, I find that Mrs. Sue Podolska's petition for conservatorship is not only without merit, but appears motivated by financial rather than emotional concerns." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Sue's face went white with shock and rage. "Additionally," Judge Chen continued, raising her voice over celebration, "I am ordering an immediate investigation into Mrs. Podolska's financial activities during Mr. Hombre's incapacitation. This court does not look kindly on those who would prey upon the vulnerable." As they left the courthouse that afternoon, Tara and James walked hand in hand into bright sunlight, their love finally vindicated by law and witnessed by the world. The battle for their forever had been won, but more importantly, they had proven that some kinds of love are strong enough to survive any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and triumph over any enemy. The ghost had been exorcised. Now it was time to build their future. Chapter 8: Justice and New Beginnings. Standing on courthouse steps with cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, James Hombre realized that winning the legal battle was nothing compared to the victory he was about to claim in the hospital room where love had first taught him how to live. Afternoon sun blazed overhead as James and Tara emerged from the courthouse, hands clasped tightly, while reporters surged forward with cameras and microphones. The verdict had sent shockwaves through the city. The tech millionaire had not only retained control of his fortune, but publicly exposed his estranged wife's greed. "Mr. Hombre, how do you feel about the judge's decision?" shouted a Channel 7 reporter. "Ms. Moore," "What's next for your relationship?" called another. James raised his free hand, and the crowd quieted with the respect accorded to a man worth hundreds of millions. But when he spoke, his voice carried something more valuable than wealth, the authority of a man who had found his truth. "Today, justice was served," James said, voice carrying clearly. "Not just legal justice, but cosmic justice. Love won, truth won, and the woman who brought me back from the dead has been vindicated by the very system that tried to tear us apart." Tarra squeezed his hand, tears streaming as she looked up at the man who had just declared his love for her in front of half the city. 6 months ago, she had been a quiet night shift nurse. Now she stood beside the most powerful man in the city, and he was telling the world she was his miracle. "What about your marriage to Sue Poduska?" pressed a financial reporter. Finn Lawson stepped forward, expression triumphant. Mrs. Poduska's actions, abandoning her husband before his accident, emptying joint accounts, failing to visit during his 8-month coma, returning only when she learned of his recovery, constitute abandonment under state law. The marriage was effectively dissolved by her actions. Furthermore, Finn continued, savoring the moment, Mrs. Poduska has been ordered to return all assets removed from joint accounts during Mr. Hombre's incapacitation with interest. The court has also referred her actions to the district attorney for possible prosecution. A murmur ran through the reporters. Sue Poduska had vanished through a side exit the moment Judge Chen finished reading her verdict, her lawyer hustling her away to minimize damage. "Mr. Hombre," called a young reporter, "what role did Miss Moore's care play in your recovery?" James turned to look at Tarra, eyes soft with love that made cynical reporters reach for tissues. "Tarra Moar didn't just save my life," he said quietly. "She taught me what life was worth living for. She showed me that love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about what you're willing to give them. She loved me when I had nothing to offer but hope, and she brought me back to the world with that love." "Are you planning to marry Miss Moore?" shouted a reporter from the back. James smiled, secret dancing in his eyes as he looked at Tarra. "You'll have to wait and see," he said mysteriously. Kai Brennan appeared at their side, grinning as he helped clear a path through the crowd. "Come on, you two lovebirds," he said, loud enough for reporters to hear. "Let's get you somewhere private before these vultures pick you clean." As their car pulled away from the courthouse, Tara finally allowed herself to believe it was really over. Sue was gone, the legal battle was won, and she and James were free to build the life they had dreamed about during those long nights in the hospital. "I can't believe it's over," she whispered, head resting on James's shoulder. "It's not over," James said softly, lips brushing her temple. "It's just beginning." Something in his tone made Tara look up, but his expression was unreadable, eyes focused beyond the car window. She was about to ask what he meant when the car turned into Sacred Heart Medical Center's familiar parking garage. "Why are we here?" Tara asked, confused. "I thought we were going to celebrate." "We are celebrating," James said, voice carrying that mysterious note again. "But first, there's something I need to do." He led her through hospital corridors, past the nurses' station where Jade Ward gave them a knowing smile, past the rehabilitation wing where they had shared so many intimate moments, and finally to the door of room 314, the room where their love story had begun. "James, what's going on?" Tara asked as he opened the door. The room had been transformed. Hundreds of white candles flickered on every surface, casting dancing shadows and filling the space with soft, golden light. White roses covered the bed, windowsill, and floor, their fragrance mixing with familiar lavender. Soft jazz music played from hidden speakers, the same Bill Evans album that had become their soundtrack. "Oh my God," Tara breathed, hands flying to her mouth. "James, what is this?" "This is where it all began," James said, voice thick with emotion as he moved to the center of the room. This is where you saved my life, where you taught me how to love, where you showed me what it means to find your home in another person's heart. Tarra felt tears streaming as implications began to sink in. James reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, hands trembling slightly as he opened it to reveal the most beautiful ring she had ever seen. It wasn't a traditional diamond. Instead, it featured a stunning blue sapphire surrounded by white diamonds, set in platinum that caught candlelight like captured starlight. The design was unique, clearly custom-made, and somehow perfectly suited to her. "I designed this myself," James said, voice barely above a whisper as he slowly lowered to one knee. "During recovery, when I was supposed to be doing physical therapy, I was sketching ring designs instead. The sapphire is the exact color of your eyes when you smile, and the diamonds represent all the nights you stayed beside me, all the light you brought into my darkness." Tarra was sobbing now, entire body shaking with the magnitude of the moment. The man who had taught her to believe in miracles was kneeling before her in the room where their love had first bloomed, offering her forever in the language of precious stones and promises. "Tarra Moar," James said, voice growing stronger with each word. "You are my miracle, my angel, my home. You brought me back from the dead with nothing but love and faith and stubborn belief that I was worth saving. You saw something in me I didn't even know existed, and you loved me back to life." He paused, overcome with emotion, eyes never leaving her face as tears streamed down both their cheeks. "I can't promise life will be easy," he continued. "I can't promise we won't face challenges or that people won't try to tear us apart again. But I can promise I will love you with every breath for the rest of my life. I can promise I will never take for granted the miracle of your love. And I can promise that everything I am, everything I have, everything I will ever be is yours, if you'll have me." James held up the ring, hand steady despite tears. "Tarra Moar, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the love that brought me back to the world?" For a moment, Tarra couldn't speak. The beauty of the moment, the perfection of his words, the overwhelming joy of having her deepest dreams come true left her speechless. But then she found her voice, strong and clear and full of love. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes. Oh my God, James, yes." James slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and it fit perfectly, as if made for her, which it had been. The sapphire caught candlelight and threw blue fire across the walls, and Tara thought she had never seen anything more beautiful. When James stood and took her in his arms, their kiss was everything their first kiss had been and more. Promise and fulfillment, question and answer, ending and beginning wrapped into one perfect moment of connection. "I love you," Tara whispered against his lips. "I love you so much I can't even find words big enough to hold it all." "Then don't try," James murmured back. "We have the rest of our lives to find the words." They were interrupted by applause from the doorway. Kai Brennan stood there with Arya Frost, Dr. Sage Bennett, Ember Moore, and Jade Ward, all grinning through their tears as they witnessed the culmination of the greatest love story Sacred Heart Medical Center had ever seen. "About time," Kai said, voice gruff with emotion. "I was starting to think you were going to wait until discharge to pop the question." "How did you all know?" Tara asked, laughing through tears as she showed off her ring. "James has been planning this for weeks," Arya said, wiping her eyes. "He enlisted half the hospital staff to coordinate everything. We've been dying to see your reaction." "The ring is gorgeous," Ember said, examining the sapphire with an art student's eye. "James, you have excellent taste." "I had excellent inspiration," James replied, arm tightening around Tara's waist, as if he never wanted to let her go. Dr. Sage Bennett stepped forward, professional demeanor cracking to reveal emotion underneath. In 30 years of practicing medicine, I've never seen anything like what you two have. You've redefined what I thought was possible in terms of healing and recovery. Love is the best medicine, Tarra said simply, eyes never leaving James's face. I always believed that, but James proved it. We proved it together, James corrected gently. Just like we're going to prove that some love stories really do last forever. As their friends and chosen family gathered around them in the candlelit room, Tara felt a sense of completion that went beyond words. 6 months ago, she had been a lonely nurse who believed in miracles, but had never experienced one. Now she stood surrounded by people who loved her, wearing the ring of the man who had become her everything, bathed in the soft glow of candles that had witnessed the birth of forever. The legal battle was over. Obstacles had been conquered, and the future stretched ahead like an empty page waiting to be filled with adventures and memories and love that would last lifetimes. So, Kai said, breaking the reverent silence, "When's the wedding?" James and Tara looked at each other, and in that look was everything they needed to say. They had found their miracle, claimed their victory, and won their forever. Everything else was just details. "Soon," James said, voice full of promise and possibility. "Very, very soon." Outside the windows of room 314, the city sparkled in evening light, a world full of possibilities waiting for two hearts brave enough to claim their happily ever after. And in the room where love had first taught a millionaire how to live again, the future began with a kiss that tasted like forever and the whispered promise that some miracles are worth waiting a lifetime to find. Chapter 9. Planning Paradise. 3 weeks before the wedding that would be talked about for decades, Tarra Moar stood in front of a mirror wearing a dress that cost more than her annual salary and realized that Cinderella had nothing on a nurse who had loved a millionaire back to life. The bridal boutique on Fifth Avenue was the kind of place Tara had only seen in movies: crystal chandeliers, silk-covered walls, and price tags that made her dizzy. But Ember had insisted this was where the future Mrs. James Hombre needed to find her perfect dress. "Stop looking at the price tags," Ember commanded, flipping through designer gowns with confidence. "James specifically told me money is no object, and if I have to physically remove those little white tags to keep you from hyperventilating, I will." Tara laughed, fingering silk that probably cost more than her car. "It's surreal, Em. 6 months ago, I was eating ramen and worrying about student loans. Now I'm shopping for a wedding dress that costs more than most people's cars. Now you're marrying the man who literally came back from the dead for love of you," Ember corrected with a grin. "I think that entitles you to a dress that costs whatever the hell it costs." Celeste, the boutique owner who had dressed 3 generations of society brides, approached with an armload of gowns and the kind of smile that suggested she had witnessed many romantic transformations. "I've selected several options based on your measurements and venue description," Celeste said, hanging dresses on specialized hooks. "Since your wedding will be in the garden setting where your love story began, I thought we might focus on something romantic, but not overly formal. Something that speaks to the organic nature of your relationship." The first dress was stunning but wrong, too formal for a woman who had found her prince in a hospital bed. The second was beautiful, but somehow not her. But the third dress, the moment Tara saw it, she knew. It was ivory silk that seemed to glow in the boutique's soft lighting, with a fitted bodice that emphasized her waist and a flowing skirt that moved like water. The neckline was elegant but not revealing, and the back featured delicate lace that looked like butterfly wings. It was sophisticated yet romantic, classic yet unique, everything their love story had been. "Oh my God," Ember breathed as Tara emerged from the dressing room. "Tara, you look like she's about to marry the love of her life," Celeste finished with satisfaction. "This is definitely the one." Tara turned to the three-way mirror and felt her breath catch. The dress transformed her into the bride she had dreamed of being, but never quite believed she could become. She looked radiant, confident, worthy of the fairy tale that had become her life. "James is going to die when he sees you in this," Ember said, tears gathering. "Actually die and need you to nurse him back to life all over again." "Let's hope not," Tarra laughed, but she couldn't stop staring at her reflection. This was really happening. She was really going to marry James Hombre in 2 weeks. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations that felt like organized chaos. Arya Frost had taken charge of the bachelorette party with military precision, while Kai Brennan coordinated James's bachelor party with the enthusiasm usually reserved for hostile corporate takeovers. No strippers, Tara had insisted when Arya outlined party plans over coffee. "Come on," Arya replied with mock disappointment. "What about one really tasteful stripper? Someone who strips down to scrubs and pretends to take vital signs?" "Arya, fine. We'll stick to champagne, spa treatments, and excessive romantic comedies. But I'm putting my foot down on karaoke. You're singing 'I Will Always Love You,' whether you want to or not." The venue for the wedding was the Botanical Garden on the city's outskirts, the same garden where James had first seen colors again, where they had shared their first, almost kiss, where their love had bloomed under stars. James had rented the entire facility for the weekend, transforming it into a wedding wonderland. "I want to show you something," James said one evening as they sat in his penthouse reviewing seating charts. "But you have to promise not to peek." "James, we agreed no wedding surprises," Tara protested, but she allowed him to cover her eyes as he led her onto the terrace. "This isn't a surprise," he said softly. "This is a memory." When he removed his hands, Tara gasped. The terrace had been transformed into a replica of the hospital garden where they had fallen in love. The same flowers, the same layout, even the same bench where they had sat under stars. Tiny lights twinkled overhead like captured starlight, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. "How did you?" Tara began, but James silenced her with a finger against her lips. "I wanted to recreate the place where I first realized I was falling in love with you," he said softly. "The place where you showed me the world was full of colors I had never seen before." He led her to the bench and pulled out a small notebook, the same one he had been writing in during recovery. "I've been working on my vows," he said, suddenly nervous. "But I wanted to practice them here first." "James," Tara whispered, heart overflowing, "you didn't have to do all this." "Yes, I did," he replied firmly. "You gave me everything when I had nothing to give back. You brought me back to life with love and faith and endless devotion. The least I can do is give you the most beautiful wedding the world has ever seen." As they sat in their recreated garden under city lights, James read her excerpts from his vows, words that spoke of miracles and second chances, of love that transcended death itself, of a future painted in colors that had never existed before she taught him how to see. "Your turn," he said when he finished, eyes bright with tears. "What are you going to promise me?" Tara pulled out her own notebook, filled with words she had been writing and rewriting for weeks. "I promise to love you not just in easy moments, but in hard ones too," she began, voice steady and strong. "I promise to be your anchor when the world feels unsteady, your light when darkness threatens to return, your home when you need somewhere safe to rest." "What else?" James asked softly. "I promise to never stop believing in miracles," Tara continued, "because you taught me that love really can conquer death, that faith really can move mountains, that two hearts really can beat as one when they find their perfect match." The bachelor party turned out to be a perfect reflection of the man James had become, intimate, meaningful, and focused on relationships that truly mattered. Kai had arranged for a private room at their favorite jazz club, the same one where James used to go before his accident when he needed to think. To James, Kai raised his glass as their small group gathered around their table, who taught us all that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. To love, added Doctor. Sage Bennett, who had become not just James's doctor but a cherished friend, and to the miraculous power of two hearts that refused to give up on each other. To Tarra, James said quietly, voice thick with emotion, who saved my life in every way a person can be saved, and who's about to make me the happiest man alive. Meanwhile, across town, Tara's bachelorette party was a perfect blend of laughter, tears, and deep female bonding. Arya had arranged for them to take over the same hospital room where James had proposed, filling it with champagne, chocolate, and enough tissues for inevitable emotional breakdowns. Speech, Ember demanded as they settled into the candlelit room with their drinks. Tell us how it feels to be living in a real-life fairy tale. It feels terrifying and wonderful and completely surreal, Tara admitted, curling up in the chair that had been her second home for so many months. A year ago, I was just a nurse who believed in miracles, but had never seen one. Now I'm about to marry my own personal miracle, and I still can't quite believe it's real. It's real, Arya said firmly, and you deserve every second of it. You saved that man's life, Tara. You loved him back from the dead. If anyone deserves a fairy tale ending, it's you. What scares you most? Asked one of the other nurses. That I'll wake up, Tara said honestly, that this will all turn out to be some elaborate coma dream, and I'll be back in my tiny apartment with my student loans and ramen noodles, and James will just be a patient I imagined falling in love with. Not going to happen, Ember said fiercely. I've seen the way he looks at you, Tara. That man worships the ground you walk on. He's not going anywhere. As the evening wound down and friends gradually departed, Tara found herself alone in the room where it all began, surrounded by lingering candle scent and laughter echoes. She pulled out her phone and found a text from James, sent just minutes earlier. Missing you already. Can't wait to see you walk down the aisle and become my wife. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Sleep well, my angel. Tara smiled as she typed back, 2 more weeks and we'll never have to miss each other again. I love you to the moon and back, my miracle man. The final weeks flew by in a blur of fittings, last-minute details, and anticipation that made time feel both infinite and impossibly short. James surprised her with a rehearsal dinner at the restaurant where they had shared their first meal outside the hospital, and Tara surprised him with a wedding gift, a custom watch engraved with room 314's coordinates and the words, "Where Love Began." "One more day," James whispered as they said goodnight after the rehearsal, holding her close but not kissing her. They had decided to wait until the altar for their next kiss, wanting their wedding day to be as magical as possible. "One more day," Tara agreed, heart racing with excitement and joy, and absolute certainty that tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of their lives. As she lay in bed that night in the hotel room where her sisters and bridesmaids were staying, Tara thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From lonely night shift nurse to bride of the most amazing man she had ever known, from believing in miracles to living inside one, from loving in secret to being loved openly and completely. Tomorrow she would walk down an aisle lined with the same flowers that had bloomed in the garden where they fell in love. Tomorrow she would promise forever to the man who had taught her that some love stories really do last lifetimes. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. James Hombre, and their fairy tale would officially begin. But tonight she was still Tarra Moar, the nurse who had saved a millionaire's life and found her own happily ever after in the process. And that felt like the most beautiful thing in the world. Chapter 10. 2 Hearts, 1 Soul. At 4:47 p.m. on a perfect September afternoon, as golden sunlight painted the garden where their love story began, Tarra Moar walked down an aisle scattered with white rose petals toward the man who had proved that miracles don't just happen in fairy tales. The morning of the wedding dawned with perfect weather, clear blue skies, gentle breeze, and golden sunlight that promised a day of magic. Tara woke in the bridal suite to find Ember already awake, sitting by the window with tears streaming down her face. "Em, what's wrong?" Tara asked, instantly alert. "Nothing's wrong," Ember laughed, wiping her eyes. "Everything's perfect. I'm just so happy for you, Tara. So incredibly, overwhelmingly happy that I can't stop crying." Arya Frost burst through the door carrying coffee and pastries, wearing the expression of a woman on a mission. "No crying until after makeup," she commanded. "We have exactly 4 hours to transform our beautiful bride into a goddess worthy of her Prince Charming." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind that felt both eternal and impossibly quick. The hairstylist created soft, romantic waves pulled back to show off vintage pearl earrings that had belonged to James's mother. The makeup artist enhanced Tara's natural beauty until she glowed like candlelight. But it was when Celeste arrived with the dress that the morning became truly magical. As Tara stepped into the ivory silk creation, she felt herself transform from nurse to bride, from ordinary woman to the heroine of her own love story. "Oh my God," Aurea breathed as Ember fastened the delicate buttons down Tara's spine. "Tara, you look like an angel," Ember finished, voice thick with emotion. "You look like the angel you've always been." The dress fit like it had been created specifically for this moment, this woman, this love story. The silk caught light and seemed to glow from within, while the lace back created patterns of shadow and light that looked like butterfly wings. When Tara turned to see herself in the full-length mirror, she gasped at her own reflection. "I look like I'm getting married," she whispered, wonder filling her voice. "You are getting married," Arya laughed through tears. "In exactly 2 hours, you're going to walk down that aisle and marry the man who literally came back from the dead for love of you." Meanwhile, at the botanical garden, James was experiencing his own morning of magical preparation. The venue had been transformed overnight into something from a fairy tale. Thousands of white roses and baby's breath created archways and borders, while soft tulle and twinkling lights turned the garden into an outdoor cathedral. "Nervous?" Kai Brennan asked as he helped James with his cufflinks in the groom's preparation room overlooking the garden. "Terrified," James admitted with a smile that belied his words. "But not about marrying Tara, about whether I deserve her, whether I'll be able to give her the life she deserves, whether I'll ever be able to love her as completely as she loves me." "You already do," Kai said firmly. "James, I've known you for 15 years, and I've never seen you as happy, as complete, as absolutely right as you've been since Tara came into your life. She didn't just save your life, she gave you a soul." Dr. Sage Bennett, who would be officiating after getting ordained online specifically for this wedding, knocked and entered with a warm smile. "How's our groom holding up?" "Ready to marry the woman of his dreams," James replied, straightening his tie, deep blue silk that perfectly matched Tara's engagement ring. "Dr. Bennett, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to perform the ceremony." "Are you kidding?" Dr. Bennett laughed. "After witnessing your love story from the beginning, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. I've never seen anything like what you and Tara have. It's restored my faith in the healing power of love." As ceremony time approached, guests began arriving. The list was intentionally small: close friends, chosen family, and hospital staff who had witnessed their miracle unfold. The atmosphere was intimate and joyful, filled with people who had invested their hearts in this love story. At exactly 4:30 p.m., the string quartet began playing Canon in D, and guests rose as the wedding party began their procession. Arya walked first, radiant in pale blue, carrying white roses and baby's breath. Ember followed, looking every inch the artist in her flowing gown, face glowing with pride and joy. Kai escorted James to the altar, an archway of white roses positioned perfectly to frame the spot where they had first confessed their love. James looked magnificent in his charcoal gray suit, face serene but eyes bright with anticipation. Then the music changed to "The Way You Look Tonight," the same song that had been playing in James's car the night of his accident, now transformed from a memory of darkness into a celebration of light. Guests turned as one toward the back of the garden, and collective gasps echoed through the air. Tarra appeared at the head of the aisle like a vision from a dream. She had chosen to walk alone. Her father was gone, and no one else felt right for the honor. But she moved with confidence and grace, eyes locked on James's face as if he were the only person in the world. The ivory silk flowed behind her like water, catching warm afternoon sunlight and making her appear to glow from within. The vintage pearls caught the sun, and the delicate lace created patterns that shifted and danced as she moved. She carried white roses and eucalyptus, bound with ivory ribbon and a small blue charm, something borrowed from Arya. But it was her face that took everyone's breath away. Tarra was radiant with joy, her smile so brilliant it could have powered the city, her eyes bright with tears of happiness as she made her way toward the man who had become her everything. James felt his knees weaken as he watched her approach. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, but it wasn't just her physical beauty that overwhelmed him. It was the love shining in her eyes, the joy radiating from her every step, the absolute certainty that this was their moment, their miracle, their forever beginning. When she reached the altar, James stepped forward to meet her, taking her hands in his as the music faded and their guests settled into expectant silence. "You look," James began, then stopped, overwhelmed by emotion. "Like the woman who's about to marry the love of her life," Tarra finished softly, squeezing his hands. Dr. Sage Bennett smiled at them both before addressing the gathered guests. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness something truly extraordinary. The marriage of two souls who found each other across the space between life and death, who proved that love really can conquer all, and who are living proof that miracles happen every day in the most unexpected ways." She paused, looking between James and Tarra with warmth of someone who had been privileged to witness their love story from its beginning. James and Tara's relationship began in the most unlikely circumstances, a hospital room where one lay unconscious and the other tended to him with devotion that transcends professional duty. What grew between them was something science can't fully explain, but anyone who witnessed it could clearly see. A love so pure, so powerful, so absolutely certain that it literally brought a man back from the edge of death. The garden was completely silent except for soft sounds of people crying happy tears. Today they stand before us not as patient and caregiver, not as millionaire and nurse, but as two people who have found their perfect match, their missing piece, their home in each other's hearts. "James, you may speak your vows." James pulled out a folded piece of paper, hands trembling slightly as he began to read. "Tarra, 8 months ago I was lost in darkness, so complete I thought it was death itself. But every night, through that endless gray, I heard your voice calling me home, your voice reading me poetry, telling me stories, sharing your dreams with a man who couldn't respond, but who was drinking in every word like life itself." His voice grew stronger, more confident. "You didn't just save my life, you taught me what life was worth living for. You showed me that love isn't about what someone can give you, but about what you're willing to give them. You loved me when I had nothing to offer but hope, and you brought me back to the world with the power of that love." Tara was crying openly now, tears streaming as James spoke words that captured their entire journey. I promise to love you not just in easy moments, but in impossible ones too. I promise to be your shelter when the world feels cold, your strength when you feel weak, your joy when darkness threatens to return. I promise to never take for granted the miracle of your love, and I promise to spend every day proving that I'm worthy of the angel who saved my soul. James folded the paper with shaking hands. Tarra Moar, you are my miracle, my home, my heart beating outside my body. I love you beyond words, beyond time, beyond life itself. Dr. Bennett nodded to Tara, who pulled out her own vows written on paper that looked tear-stained and rewritten multiple times. James, she began, voice clear and strong despite her tears, I fell in love with you long before you could love me back. I fell in love with your peaceful face, your gentle hands, and the way you seemed to be fighting to return to life even in your deepest sleep. I talked to you every night for 8 months, believing that somewhere in that darkness you could hear me. She paused, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. When you woke up and spoke my name, I knew that everything I had believed about love, about faith, about the power of two hearts to find each other was true. You proved that love really can transcend death, that faith really can move mountains, that miracles really do happen when we believe in them strongly enough. Her voice grew stronger, filled with all the love she had been carrying. I promise to love you through every season of our lives, through success and struggle, through health and sickness, through every joy and challenge that comes our way. I promise to be your anchor when the world feels unsteady, your light when darkness threatens to return, your home when you need somewhere safe to rest. Tara looked directly into James's eyes, voice becoming almost a whisper that somehow carried clearly through the garden. You taught me that some love stories really do last forever, that some connections transcend the physical world, that some hearts really are meant to beat as one. James Hombre, you are my miracle, my everything. I love you to the moon and back, for now and for always. As she finished, the garden erupted in soft applause, and the sounds of people crying happy tears. Even Dr. Bennett had to pause to compose herself. The rings, she said, and Kai stepped forward with platinum bands that James had designed, simple but elegant, engraved inside with room 314's coordinates and the date of James's awakening. James, do you take Tara to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, for as long as you both shall live? I do, James said, voice ringing with certainty as he slipped the ring onto Tara's finger, right beside the sapphire engagement ring that caught light like captured starlight. Tara, do you take James to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Tara replied, voice strong and sure as she placed James's ring on his finger, completing the circle that would bind them together forever. By the power vested in me by the state, and by the love that has brought us all together today, Dr. Bennett announced, voice ringing with joy, I now pronounce you husband and wife. James, you may kiss your bride. James cupped Tara's face in his hands, thumbs wiping away tears of joy. Hello, Mrs. Hombre, he whispered. Hello, Mr. Hombre, she whispered back. When their lips met, it was magic, not just the kiss itself, but the moment, the setting, the absolute certainty that they had found there forever. The garden erupted in cheers and applause as guests celebrated the official beginning of their happily ever after. As they broke apart, both laughing through tears, the quartet began playing At Last by Etta James, and James led his new wife back down the aisle as a married couple, faces radiant with joy as they walked through a shower of white rose petals thrown by cheering guests. The reception was held in the same garden, transformed with market lights and elegant settings that created an atmosphere of intimate celebration. As the sun set and garden lights began to twinkle like stars, James and Tarra shared their first dance as husband and wife to the wordless lullaby that Tarra had hummed during those long nights in the hospital. "I can't believe we're really married," Tarra whispered as they swayed together under the stars, her head resting on James's shoulder. "Believe it," James murmured into her hair. "You're stuck with me now, Mrs. Hombre, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." "And beyond," Tarra added softly, "our love is stronger than death. Remember, you proved that when you came back to me." As the evening progressed, their gathering of loved ones shared toasts and stories and laughter that echoed through the garden like music. But the most beautiful moment came when they found themselves alone in the garden where their love story had begun. The market lights twinkled overhead like captured stars, and the scent of roses filled the air as they swayed together in contented silence. "So, what happens now?" Tarra asked, echoing the question she had asked months ago in a hospital room that seemed like a lifetime away. "Now," James said, spinning her gently under the stars, "we live happily ever after. We travel the world, we build a family, we grow old together, and we prove that some love stories really do last forever." "Forever and a day," Tarra agreed, rising on her tiptoes to kiss her husband under the same stars that had witnessed their first confession of love. As they walked hand in hand toward the car that would take them to their honeymoon suite, Tarra reflected on their incredible journey. From lonely night shift nurse to wife of the most amazing man she had ever known. From believing in miracles to living inside one. Behind them, the garden glowed with lingering magic of their wedding day, roses releasing their fragrance into the night air like a blessing. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, new joys to explore together. But tonight was perfect, a fairy tale ending that was really just the beginning of their greatest love story yet to be written. And in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echo of a lullaby hummed in a hospital room months ago, the wordless melody that had guided a lost soul home to love, to life, to the woman who had proved that miracles happen every day when we believe in them strongly enough. The end, or rather, the beginning.